I did resist leadership for a long time, and I think that some people, they don't sort of listen to that call for leadership. They maybe walk in the other direction, and I nearly did that same thing as well. But I have a little phrase that I always say to myself around this, which is grow or life will make you grow. So you don't have an option. There is no safe space to go, do you know what? I'm going to let the hard work be done by someone else and sit on the couch, because pain will come your way eventually where you need to grow. So you can either grow now or life will make you do it. So which one do you want to do? And so the same thing applies to why I run Body Talk, because, going back to being a child, I really struggled with communication and I was very awkward with people. I was very shy as a child. I'm highly introverted, and I got diagnosed just last year when I was 44. I finally got diagnosed as being autistic. And so there was various reasons why, as a child, I was struggling with communication, but I didn't know what these things were back then. I just knew that other people seemed to be better at having conversations and making banter and having playful jokes together and building friendships and so on. And I was always kind of the awkward kid on the outside of that.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to today's episode of the Play Your Position podcast. I'm excited because it's game day here at PYP today. And you know what that means. I've got a fantastic guest who is suited up, ready to take the field. He is going to take us into his leadership journey and share with us some insights, some stories that are sure to inspire and teach us all new ways of thinking about ourselves as leaders in a complicated and demanding world. His name is Richard Newman. Richard, are you ready for kickoff?
I'm here. I'm ready to go. Yes. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So Richard is the founder of Body Talk. And in the past 23 years, his team has trained over 120,000 business leaders around the world to improve their communication and impact. In fact, one client gained over $1 billion in new business in just 1 year using Richard's techniques, winning 100% of their new business pitches. When he was 18 years old, Richard started his mission to discover the core principles of communication. And to do that, he went to live in the foothills of the Himalayas with Tibetan monks who spoke no English. So they had to communicate nonverbally to understand each other. And then he worked as a professional actor before becoming a communication coach and keynote speaker. Richard has won the coveted Cicero Grand Prize Award for Best Speechwriter of the Year. He's had his research on nonverbal communication published in the Journal of Psychology, and his study proved that you can increase your leadership ratings by 44% and win 59% more votes in an election by changing a few simple behaviors. He's got a new book out called Lift Your Impact, and he's going to talk about that book today, along with everything else that I just set the stage for. So, Richard, let's get right into it. When did you first get the call to leadership? Tell us that story. How old were you? Was it when you went to live with the monks, or was it earlier, later? Give us some context about this amazing life that you're leading right now.
Thanks. Well, I think that the call to leadership for me really probably came in 3 different stages. And so the first inklings of this that I got was when I was 12 years old. I'd moved up to high school, and I've always loved basketball. And so I put myself forward for the basketball team. And I realized that in the first year of high school, at my particular school, they didn't do basketball. They did every other sport. They didn't do basketball. And so we had to wait till our second year of high school to start playing. And so we put our team together. We went to do our first game. And of course, every other team in the county, they'd been playing basketball in their schools for a year before we started. And we got absolutely demolished. So I still remember the score. The score was 81 points to the other team, to Chesham High School, and to 18 points to us, so 81 to 18. I always remember those numbers because they're the reverse digits.
Yeah.
And we walked away from that humiliated, and a lot of people actually left the team thinking this is ridiculous. We're going to get destroyed all year. And so I remember thinking at that point that it was a real shame that we hadn't had the opportunity early on, because we had a lot of potential. And if only we'd had somebody give us some guidance the year before, then actually we would have stepped up and been doing pretty well. And so as the years went past, after that, I started playing, more and more, and my team together, we would get together every morning before school, every lunch break, every afternoon after school. And then we put together a county team, and we ended up having a pretty good team. So 7 of the people on my school team became members of the county team as well. And by the time we got to the end of high school, we were demolishing everybody else by at least 30-point leads in every game we had. But what I did in the call to leadership is I kept my promise to myself that I would help make sure that the first year in high school, that they were getting some coaching. And so in my final years in high school, I said to the coaches in the PE department, I said, could we do this? Could we give them some coaching? They said, we don't have the time. I said, would you let me do it? And the other people on our team, could we go and teach them so they don't get demolished like we did? And they said, okay. And so I put this together. I put a practice together. I managed to coach them all the way through that first year. So they were set up and ready to go into their second year. So I just felt that need to make sure that when there was a void, if you like, of leadership, that I was stepping into it. And then I guess that second call, as you alluded to, was really around the monastery, where I was intending to go to university. And just before I was leaving high school, this guy came to give a talk to us all. He'd been at the school a few years before, and he, instead of going to university, he had gone to Kathmandu to live in an orphanage to help there, to give his time. And he said, you guys should do this too. And at the end of his talk, he said, who's going to do this instead of going to university? And 3 people in the room of about 150 raised their hand. And mine was one of those hands. And I had no idea before his talk that I was going to do that. But I decided that I would, which led me to then finding a way to go and live and work with monks in the foothills of the Himalayas, teaching them English. So I got to sort of step up and be their teacher and teach at a local children's school as well. And then, the third phase of stepping up into leadership, though, which is an important one, is in my business. My business was built out of a hobby. I'd never had a business plan. I've never gone to business school. It was just a hobby that I had that, people were enjoying, and they kept on saying, could you do more? And so I had to hire some more people to work with me because I couldn't run all of the events. But it got to the stage, and this was around about, I'm going to say, sort of 6 years ago, where people around me were thoroughly pushing me to lead more. And I was resisting it, saying, look, I want to teach. I'm a teacher. I'm a coach. That's what I want to do. I don't really want to be a leader. I want to do the teaching. And so I even hired somebody to go in and be the leader of the team so I could just keep on doing coaching, which was a huge mistake. So I learned my lesson from that and finally realized that in order for me to complete my mission of elevating as many lives as I can, helping people find their voice, I actually had to step up and lead my team in a way that I'd never done before, putting myself forward as that front of the team, but also the protector and the provider of the team. So it was a long journey for me, and I finally have accepted that call to leadership.
That's so interesting. What do you see are the differences between teaching and leading as you are now? Because to me, being a teacher and a coach, that is a leadership role.
Yeah, I absolutely think that. And when you're at the front of a room, whether you've got 10 people in the room with you or 1,000 people in the room, you are there to lead that tribe for that period of time.
That's right.
Which might be 30 minutes or it might be 2 days or something like that. And so you do need to embody leadership qualities. And then I think, though, what I've recognized is that because I love to teach and I create my own material and I have fun activities, it's the fun side of leadership, because I know that people are going to enjoy it. I know they're going to feel empowered. I know that at the end of it, they're going to give a round of applause and say that was great. And so that for me is the fun side of leadership. The harder side of leadership that I resisted for a long time was more along the lines of business strategies and making tough decisions that needed to be made. where for a long time, my way of running my company was just to say, look, I want to hire brilliant people and just trust that they'll go off and do their roles well. And more and more, there was then a sense of, well, what's the hierarchy here? And, internal politics was building up in the company, and more people saying to me, where are we heading? I know it's all in your head, Richard, but we need to know more about what we're supposed to do as a team and where we're heading and what's the goal and how we're all going to fit together. And, then there was infighting that was happening a few years back where a negative culture sprung up because I wasn't holding people accountable. Mm-hmm. And so I had to really step forward and say, look, I am the leader of this team, and I'm going to make sure the culture works, and I'm going to bring you all in on where the strategy is going and delegate to more people who are going to work on this piece with me so that we are, properly functioning well as a team. As we went from being a hobby business to this, multi-million-pound company, there were pieces that I suddenly needed to step into, lean into, and make sure they were in place.
Yeah. And thank you for being candid about resisting that transition, because that is that's a big transition that many business leaders experience because they started as a doer. They started as delivering the thing, whether it's baking cupcakes or in your case, you were teaching the workshops, the experiences, and it was great. And it was feeding you in a way that you really loved. And, as these things go, as you just described, you faced that precipice, or that gulf you had to go across. And that is not an easy transition for people. And is actually that gulf swallows a lot of folks. They just can't make that transition because there's numerous reasons, but you've made that transition. And now like you just said, you're a multi-million-pound business. You've got it, it sounds like an amazing team. I've been on your website. What you do, what you provide is really great. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of Body Talk, of everything you could have done. Why this? What is it about this work, Richard, and leading this company that just lights you up inside?
Yeah, well, a couple of things to say, actually, and what you just said that leads us into this subject, which is, you're right that I did resist leadership for a long time. And I think that, some people don't sort of listen to that call for leadership. They maybe walk in the other direction. And I nearly did that same thing as well. But I have a little phrase that I always say to myself around this, which is grow or life will make you grow. So you don't have an option. There is no safe space to go, do you know what? I'm going to let the hard work be done by someone else and sit on the couch, because pain will come your way eventually where you need to grow. So you can either grow now or life will make you do it. So which one do you want to do? And so the same thing applies to why I run Body Talk, because, going back to being a child, I really struggled with communication, and I was very awkward with people. I was very shy as a child. I'm highly introverted, and I got diagnosed just last year when I was 44. I finally got diagnosed as being autistic. And so there was various reasons why, as a child, I was struggling with communication, but I didn't know what these things were back then. I just knew that other people seemed to be better at having conversations and making banter and having playful jokes together and building friendships and so on. And I was always kind of the awkward kid on the outside of that. And so it got to the point where towards the end of high school years, where I realized that I had a challenge around communication. And there was a friend of mine who, he was so brilliant. He's such a wonderful person. He's actually godfather to one of my sons. And, but he wanted to go to Oxford University, and he studied so hard and he read every book, and he was the brightest person at our school. And lots of people at our school would go to either Oxford or Cambridge. It was one of those types of schools. And, he got a rejection letter from Oxford saying, look, you passed the exams and everything. We had this interview with you. And part of the reason they were rejecting him was because of communication skills. And I was shocked by that, because I thought he's such a great guy and he's easy to get on with and he's so brilliant, but still communication skills held him back from his biggest goal in life at that time. So I thought, I'm never going to be as smart as him. I'm never going to be as hardworking or as well read as him. I've got to get good at communication, because otherwise this is going to hold me back for my whole life. And so I started reading books on communication. I read over 200 books on different areas.
Wow. 200. Oh.
Yeah. And I just sort of kept on reading them. It got to the point where I thought, okay, even with books, I thought I've seen so many of these ideas in other books. But if I could get just one extra idea from a new book or consolidate ideas I'd read in other books, I'd just keep on going. And then I did a couple of other things. So as we mentioned briefly before, I decided I would go and live in a Tibetan monastery with monks who didn't speak any English. And the big challenge that then I had was I had to communicate completely non-verbally in order to connect with them. I had to use my body language and tone of voice to help them understand me and learn a language from me and for me to learn from them. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. I felt this deep connection I was able to create non-verbally with them. And then when I came back to the UK, I studied acting for 3 years because I wanted to learn more about, stage presence and storytelling and gravitas and all of these other things, how to move, how to stand, how to speak in a way that influences an audience. And then it was actually my hairdresser who said to me, "Hey, Richard, you sound like you're really fascinated about communication. If I give you a free haircut, would you come and coach my my trainee hairdressers how to be better with their clients?" And I said, I have no idea how to do that. He said, "Well, just make it up and see what happens."
Oh,
and
wow.
And so I did it and they loved it and I really loved it too. And so I kept on going back and doing those things. And from there, word of mouth spread. And to cut a long story short on this, a reputation spread around that to the point where I was then doing it for many people and needed to hire a team. So that now, these days we get around 2,000 bookings per year from clients all over the world who want to work with us on this piece. But it all started from me deciding to grow, grow or life will make you grow. I thought I have to grow my communication skills.
Yeah.
And I was scratching my own itch and then was able to pass on what I'd learned to other people.
Wow. That's such a great backdrop to where you are today. Now, you brought up storytelling. I'd love for you to talk about why almost everyone is doing this wrong in business, because storytelling is it's like hashtag storytelling everywhere on social media, right? And as far as leadership goes, it's definitely a skill that is lauded and expected, right? The better the storyteller you are, typically your success parallels that. So tell us how almost everyone does this wrong in business and how do we do it right?
Yeah, you're so right to say that storytelling has been a buzzword for, at least the last 10 years in business. It's gradually been building. And I think that, potentially through TED Talks as well, people have thought, oh, good storytellers, they're seen well, they become famous, they sell books. Everyone needs to step up their game. And I actually think TED Talks did a huge favor for business because before that, people would, stand behind a lectern and point to a screen filled with bullet points and think, well, this is probably how presentations are done. And then we saw TED Talks and thought, oh, there is a better way. Okay, fine. Maybe I don't need to stand behind a wooden box. Maybe I can tell a story. But then people started to think, okay, storytelling. And the way that people are doing this wrong is that you often get people thinking, okay, I've got to be funny, or I've got to tell anecdotes, or I need to take a historical event that is significant and tell people about that. And while all of that stuff can have value in certain situations, that is not what is meant by business storytelling. So simply put, storytelling is something that you can use for emails, for describing what's on a spreadsheet, for explaining to people the value of your product, service, or idea. And it's about taking information and putting it into the structure of a story. So as I'm sure, people would be familiar about if they've heard the term storytelling much, going back to the 1950s, you got Joseph Campbell, who is a mythologist, and he was studying the way that stories had been told. And what he found is that if you look around the world for the last few thousand years, you can find different civilizations that had no contact with each other, that were telling stories that had the same structure, which we then discovered, thousands of years later when we saw them chipped into clay tablets, and we could see this structure lying there, which he called the hero's journey. And he put it down into the 17 stages of the hero's journey. Now, I've actually seen some people out there, some speakers saying, what you need to do in your next team meeting is go through the 17 stages of the hero's journey as you describe your company's mission, which is just so challenging for people to do, to go through the belly of the whale and the denial of the question request and the return with the elixir. When you're sort of holding a staff meeting, it's challenging enough there, let alone doing it in an email. And so what I wanted to do is boil it down and figure out, well, what is that journey really doing, and how do you apply it every day into real world scenarios? And essentially what people need to do, if they want to do this well, you have to engage 3 parts of the brain in a specific order in order for people to care about what you're saying, understand it, be excited about it, and be able to repeat it. So what we often do with leadership teams is show them how to cascade messages. So not just show up with some PowerPoint, but show up with a compelling story that says, this is our vision, this is our product, this is our strategy, this is the insight that you need from this spreadsheet. And they put it in the form of a story so that everyone in the meeting gets it and they can cascade it through word of mouth after the event. So the 3 areas of the brain that you have to engage is the survival mind, the emotional mind, and the logical mind, just keeping it really simple. And so, great stories will do this, where at the beginning, if you go through survival mind, emotional mind, then logical mind, look at any kind of story. You see somebody at the beginning, the protagonist who's enjoying their day, and then suddenly a massive challenge happens, like an alien invasion or an explosion or the breakdown of a relationship, something like that. They have a challenge that happens there. And then the survival part of our mind thinks, oh no, I hope this person's going to be okay. What's going to happen next? And then very quickly, you realize the emotional mind gets engaged. You start to realize there is a way forward where life won't be awful forever. You see this potential on the horizon for if they just get over this mountain into the distance, there is this utopia life that can happen for them and for everybody else. So the emotional part of the mind lights up and says, wow, I wonder if they'll be able to get there. And then the logical mind kicks in and thinks, well, how on earth is that going to happen? And you see them go through that journey of the logical steps that have to be taken to go from where they are to where they need to be, and the tremendous growth that the central character goes through. So you can put that into a team meeting. Let's say that you're talking about something as dull as the numbers on the weekly spreadsheet. What do? So you say to people, hey, everyone, thanks for joining. Look, I know last week we were discussing a challenge because I know that you're deeply concerned about this number over here, 17.2%, which if we don't do anything about it in 6 months' time is going to cause us massive pain in the budget and could mean that we have to make staff cuts. And so I know that you're feeling concerned. But suddenly everyone in the room is paying attention. Then you say, what if I could share with you something on this spreadsheet that would give you some insights that would let us know where we need to head over the coming months in such a way that we could maybe save some money and save some time and also improve our reputation as a company. If I could just show you a couple of insights on this spreadsheet that do that, would that be valuable? The emotional part of the mind says, yes, I want to learn about your spreadsheet. And then you give them the logic. You say, look at box 4.10x over here. And this is the bit that fills in what you need to know to get us from where we are to where we want to be. So you're lighting up the right elements of the mind. You're doing it in the right order. And when people leave the room, they will know why you told them, rather than just thinking, I don't know, Barry said something about 24.3%. I don't really know what that means. So you put in everything into context. Their brain is lit up and they want to listen to you in future.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
Man, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing those 3 parts of the brain and a real world example with something that most people's eyes roll back in their head when they're like spreadsheets. Oh no.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show the applicability, the universality of knowing how to bring to life. That's the definition of creativity, is making the complex very simple to understand. And Joseph Campbell, I can't think of a better guide as far as understanding the archetypes, the universal patterns that he devoted his entire life to studying. And team, if you're at all interested in learning more about Joseph Campbell, by all means, I can't recommend him enough. I've read several of his books, and he's clearly influenced you, Richard. In fact, you have, you talk about in your new book, Lift Your Impact. The subtitle is Transform Your Mindset, Influence, and Future to Elevate Your Work, Team, and Life. And one of the questions that, people ask is, okay, they're going to come to you, say, Richard, listen, the world is just so negative all the time. I'm constantly bombarded with negative stories. The media, no matter where I turn, there's something negative. Somebody just died. There's a tragedy here. There's a war here. There's blah, blah. The food is bad. Yeah. The water is drying up. I mean, there's no work. Everything is negative, negative, negative. And I think humans are desperate today for inspiration, for being uplifted, for finding a light in the darkness, particularly because we're still coming out of the pandemic. Just because the world has opened up again doesn't mean that everybody's la-di-da, it's skipping around. And there's a lot of trauma that happened on a mindset level. So you have 3 bullet points. How do you lift your mindset? Would you mind talking about those 3 things and why they matter?
Yeah, I think, the phrase that you said there that really stood out for me was finding that light in the darkness, because there is this long tail of what's happened since the pandemic and how it's impacted people of different generations. So,
yes.
I've got 2 kids who are at school, and depending on which age you were at school, it impacted you in different ways. There are people who graduated at the start of the pandemic, and then they're sort of trying to start work and figure out how on earth are they going to do it. And that impact of that lack of being around people who were leaders when they needed them. And then other people who are in leadership positions suddenly getting shut down and not being able to see their people. So there's been a huge challenge for people of different ages around this. And so if I give my example, going back to 2019, if you think about this for a business model, 70% of our work involved getting on an aeroplane and flying overseas to go and work with our clients worldwide. And 100% of our work involved being in an enclosed area with a group of people. Yep. And all of that was made illegal. We couldn't do any of it. And, I had people on the payroll. I had a big, expensive London office that we weren't allowed to go into. And everything, we had a big pipeline of work at the beginning of 2020, and then everything that gave us an income disappeared, but our bills did not disappear. And so people were coming to me on my team panicking, saying, we're going to go out of business. There's no question. And there were other people in my industry that I knew, they were panicking. They were feeling they were going to go out of business as well. And some people on my team said, look, there's only one way forward here. We have to fire people. We need to refuse to pay our taxes, and we need to take out big government loans because that's the only way to survive. And at this point, thankfully, I'd been running my business for 20 years, and I'd taken that call to leadership just prior to this anyway. And I thought there is no way that I am doing that to people. I am a leader. I am called to protect and provide for my team at all costs, even if there's a pandemic. And I need to protect and provide for my clients as well. And to do that, I've got to figure out how I'm going to get through this. And there was all sorts of other challenges going on. There was a company that set themselves up specifically to steal our clients. And we're going through our company database, trying to take those clients. And we went through a huge legal battle at the start of the pandemic too, just as we're trying to figure out how do we do virtual working when we've never done that before. So there was loads of stress going on. And so I thought, I have to work on my mindset. And at that time, clients who I was speaking to saying, look, what can we do for you now? How do we help you through this? They were saying, look, we need work on our mindset. We are feeling anxious, stressed out. There's pressure. We're feeling overwhelmed. We don't know what's going on. And so I thought at the heart of this, for me to help myself, my family, my team, my clients, I have to work on my mindset. And thankfully, I've been teaching mindset for a good few years before this. And so I went back to fundamentals, to the things that I knew would work for me. And so the key, the crux of this is that, certainly in mindset, people would have heard about, meditating and that sort of piece. For me, it's all about being a rock in the storm, making sure no matter what's going on with the inflation and politics and the economy and anything else that's going on, that you can always be a rock in the storm. And so to do this, the first key practical piece I would say to people to do is to focus on your primary values. And values are talked about a lot, and sometimes people don't know what that means. But the simple way around this is that everybody has about 30 to 40 principles or values that will nudge them in one direction or another when they're making a key decision. And you can't keep them all in your mind at all times, but they're just there subconsciously that come up to mind when they need to be. But there'll be 3 primary ones that you can focus on, that you can remind yourself of all day, every day. And the reason this is so important in a stressful situation is there was a great series of studies that was done back in 2015 by Cresswell and and Sherman in Germany, where they were using a series of experiments using the triasocial stress test protocol. And in essence, what they found out is that before people go into stressful events, if you focus on your core values, then it will lower your heart rate, it lowers your adrenaline levels, it lowers your cortisol, stress hormone levels, and you get a better reaction from the people that you're speaking to. Because by focusing on our core values, we get internal validation. Now, just imagine the benefit of that when you find it so hard to find a light in challenging moments. What do people do? They go to social media. They go and, watch TV, or they go outside of themselves, and they might sort of post something on social media and then check it 15 minutes later to see, I wonder how many likes I've got. And they're looking for this external validation and getting more and more stressed. So what values do is that if you focus on your values, you write down, what are my top 3 principles that I want to live my life by? And you spend just 15 minutes writing them down, understanding why you're so proud of them, why they matter to you. Then you can get to this place of internal validation, feeling proud, grounded, and centered in the best version of you that you want to be. And if you do that, once you've done it once, you can then come back to those values daily to prime your mind to be the best version of you. You can put them on a post-it note next to your bed. You can put them on the home screen of your phone or your laptop and remind yourself over and over again, this is the person I'm going to be. I can't change what's happening in the economy. I can't change who's going to be the next president or prime minister. I can't do those things. But what I can do is I can focus on my values and be the best version of me each day, thereby lifting my impact. So that's step number 1. That was kind of a long answer there. Shall I dive into parts 2 and 3?
Yeah, give us those 2, because it completes the little exercise.
Sure. So you got part 1, which is focusing on your values, and that essentially, it gives you what I call a true north compass, where you think, if I point myself in this direction based on these values, then I know I will be proud of myself when I put my head on the pillow at night tonight. Once you've done that, you can then start to think about your vision. And your vision is that sense of, if anything is possible, if I have a magic wand, where would I love to be in the future? And the reason it's different to a lot of goal setting says that, where people say, dream up where you want to be, have a vision board and so on. And that's all well and good. But if you do that before you've got your values in place, you can end up having things on your vision board that you don't actually want for yourself.
Yes.
It's something that your parents wanted you to have, or something that your boss thinks you should do, or something that you've seen in a Disney movie once, that big house with a white picket fence and there's always a wedding at the end, and you go, that must be the key to happiness. Let me have that. And then you get there and you go, oh, this doesn't seem to be as fulfilling. So first of all, you start with your values. Then you go into writing your vision story. Now, this is something that once you know how to do it, you can do it over and over again. I write it at the front of every notepad that I ever open, if I open a new sort of physical notepad. And so you write down your values, then you write down, what are my current challenges? Where am I out of alignment with these values right now in my life? And if I don't do anything about that, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, what would that mean? So I'll give you an example that one of my values is to be a good father for my young kids. And I realized, before the pandemic, that I was out of alignment with that, because I was spending 3 nights a week in a hotel room and then coming home on the weekends being jet lagged and barely seeing them. And I thought, I have to change this. I've got to make a shift. I need to find a way that I can bring my life back into balance. And, I'm thankful that the pandemic gave us the opportunity so I could shift things in that direction. So I sort of prepared to make a big shift that I thought this could be a win-win-win situation moving forwards. So to come back to that vision story, you got your current challenges. Where am I out of alignment with my values? What would that mean 3 to 5 years from now? Then you write down, if I follow my values and if I stay truly authentic to them for the next 5 years, where would I be? What would that take me to? If anything is possible based on living out these values, where would I love that to be? And then the next part of that vision story is you think, okay, so based on this, and this is similar to the storytelling principles I was talking about before, because your mind likes it. You think, okay, that's the challenge of now. This is where I'd love to be. What is the journey I can go on between here and where I want to be in order to live out those values? And the great news about it is you don't have to hit the goal to feel fulfilled, because every day you're moving forwards towards that North Star vision of the future. Every day you move towards it, you become more of yourself, you grow, you are more in alignment with those values. So it feels good to live out that piece day after day. And then the third part of this, that is the key really to unlocking what happens on that journey, is I often say to people, you don't need to think about how to go on that journey. You need to think about who. Who do you need to become in order for that journey to happen? So what part of yourself do you need to tap into, grow, or life will make you grow? What part of you do you need to grow into that will allow you to get from your current challenges to where you need to be? And so there in the book, I've gone into great depth about this, about storytelling archetypes, building onto the sort of work that was done by Carl Jung and by various others to build up archetypes that we can see in story. And what you can start to see is, maybe the role you're playing in your life story right now has worked up until now, but you need to grow into a different part of yourself in order to complete this journey that is ahead of you. And so if you lean into that growth, then you can become more of you, tap into more of your potential and light up more people around you so that you can be more of that light in the darkness for others.
Yes. And it's so, it's so important to take the time to do what you just described. Really, team, if you haven't done this for a while, carve out 30 minutes in the next week when you can sit down and you're not disturbed, you're by yourself, you have a blank piece of paper or a notebook or something. I always encourage people to do this by hand. Don't do it on your screen. Take a pen and real paper, whether it's a journal or a sketchbook or something, and really dive into what you value, and imagine it big, go bold. That's the piece that I used to struggle with. I remember back when I was a young mother, I was involved with a business that was really challenged me to grow, along the lines of what you're talking about. And, we were encouraged to set goals. And I learned that the whole purpose of a goal is to grow. There's no other reason to set a goal than to grow, period. And if you set your goal too parallel to what you've done before, you're not growing. You're just staying in the same place. And a lot of people pick safe goals because they know they can achieve them and they're going to get that hit of, hey, I did it, but you didn't really move forward. You didn't cross that divide that I was talking about earlier that you did, right? And that's, so take the time to figure out what is important to you most at this point in your life. And those are values. We may have some core values, I think, that carry through our lives, but I also think that they do evolve as we gain more experience, as events happen to us and for us. And make your vision big and bold, because if you don't, you're just going to end up with the same old. It may be dressed differently. It may, be in a different town, but you find yourself, it's like that. I don't know if you know that song by the Talking Heads
Which one?
Where he says, the lines are, this is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. Well, how did I get here? And the days go by and the water holds you down. And that song is, I'm drawing a blank on the title of it, but it's so insightful about how many people live a life of quiet desperation and never challenge themselves to lead their life in a big, bold way, the way you have, Richard, and the way that you work with teams around the world to do. And I would love to go into the archetypes. We don't have time to do that today. But again, team, you're going to want to get Richard's book. I'm going to have a link to it on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. Dive into it because, again, we all need the light in the darkness. And when we can find somebody who's excited about doing that, who has lived in the darkness and learned, that's how we grow. And so for those who are interested in increasing their influence as leaders of themselves first, and perhaps in their families, in their work life, whether they're business owners or they're working for somebody else, what are a couple of tips that you could pass along that people could actually measure and say, yeah, I can say I have increased my influence? How will they know?
Yeah, that's great. So it's something that I find is so important as a business leader to think, what are we really rooting for? What are our How are we going to measure our success? And so, of course, when you're in business, there's a need to hit your KPIs. You've got to look at the quarterly targets and so on. And, of course, we have those. We have a budget and all these things of a sense of where are we going to get to financially as a business. But the piece that's always been most important to me is, well, how many lives do we touch? How many lives did we improve? And how much of a long-standing impact is that really going to have? Because I get the great privilege of going on stage and speaking to large groups of people. I was doing a session last week. We had 10,000 people signed up for a 1-hour webinar that I was doing, and I'm aiming to give them as much value as I can in this session for the people who attended. And I love doing that. I love getting them inspired. But I know that at the end of that 1 hour situation, that they'll go away thinking, wow, I'm inspired by that. Oh, I'm going to go and have a beer. I might have a coffee. I might write down some of the stuff that happened, and then I get back into the day to day. So I'm always thinking, how do I long term create transformation for people? There's even sometimes where I get to go on stage where I've done this, where I've flown to another country and they've booked me in for a 30-minute speaking slot. And then I get there and they're overrunning. They say, could you just speak for 20 minutes and then leave and go home? And I think, wow, I've been traveling for 12 hours and you want me to speak for 20 minutes? And I think, okay, well, in 20 minutes, I can make an impact. I can plant an idea, a little bit like Inception, if you're familiar with that movie. You can plant an idea in someone's mind that could send them in another direction. Just like when I was at school where, somebody was inspiring and he was talking about, working in an orphanage. And I thought, wow. And that actually moved my life in a different direction. But with other people, I'm often thinking, okay, once I've worked with them once, that's nice. What can I do with them next? And then how do I keep on going with them? How do I create a journey of transformation for them such that I know they can achieve all of their goals? So for me, it's less about, hitting the goals that I want to hit for, the business and the number of people on our team and so on. But how many of our clients do we help hit their goals? So, what goal do they come to us with? And if I see them in a year's time for a booster session, how many of those goals have they hit along the way? For example, there's a retreat that I ran for people last year. It was a 4-day retreat. We stay in contact with each other probably just about every week, actually, since that event, and supporting each other with all the things that we made promises on achieving to make sure that those things are coming into fruition, and we keep on elevating each other all the way along the path. So for me, it's sort of less about numbers, even though they are important, but more about thinking, how significantly have I lifted other people around me such that it's created not just immediate inspiration, but long-lasting change?
Yeah. And what kind of messages from people do you hear that tells you, I did that?
Yeah, so this started to happen for me a long time ago, where it just came out of the blue, where initially I thought, I was interested in body language, a little bit about storytelling, slide design, and I put together a course. And I went to a networking event and I did a talk and I said, if you want to come on my course, let me know. And there was this guy at the bar and he said, look, I'd love to come on an event like that. It just sounds amazing. I can't right now because I've lost my job, but eventually I will. And I said to him, look, if you cover your cost of your lunch and your coffee in the room, I'll give you a place because it sounds like you really deserve this and need it. And he thanked me so much. He came on the event and I saw him again, maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months after that, maybe longer. I bumped into him somewhere else at a business event and he looked like a completely different person.
Interesting.
And so I really didn't recognize him. And he said, Richard, it's me. And I said, hey, how have you been? And he said, just so you know, I used that 1-day event that I did with you to springboard me out of 16 years of clinical depression. And my life is different now. I'm in a great place in my life with my relationships. I've got a new job and I'm just feeling vibrant. And I've put these things into action. And I thought to myself, I'm sure I just coached you on presentation skills. Like, where is this coming from? And, I aim with my events to make them lively, interactive. They're physical. People get up. They're engaging with each other. They're coming out of themselves.
Yes.
But there was another lady who came on a 2-day event a few years later where I was running a booster event for them. I think they'd had 2 days and then I was doing a booster maybe 3 months later. And before this lady walked in the room, some of her colleagues were there and they said, have you heard? Do you know what's happened for Sarah since the event? And I said, what do you mean? They said, this has changed her marriage. It's changed how she interacts with her children. The client work that she's doing now is going through the roof and she's happy. She's happy every day. And again, I thought, wow, what do we work on? Communication skills. And I realized this is having a bigger impact than I knew. And, it's been amazing. I get messages on LinkedIn from people 10 years after I've worked with them telling me the impact that the work has had. So you'll never quite know how long lasting the impact is that you've had on people. I've never been able to tell the guy who gave the talk at my school about, how he'd worked in an orphanage, how that completely changed the course of my life. But I'd always say to people, just have good intentions, go out in the world and aim to inspire and lift the people around you. You never know how far that's going to lift them.
You don't. And I get asked about this podcast. People sometimes will say, how have you done it for so long? Because I'm in my 10th year. And I said, because you don't, first of all, I love people and I love hearing stories like yours, Richard. I love presenting people like you to the world through this format. It's just such a personal, intimate experience to have a conversation in ears. I'm a big listener, and I learn so much when I listen to conversations on other shows and books and things like that. And, people ask, well, how do you know if you're affecting anybody? And I said, I can't draw a direct line between, point A and point B, but it's along the same lines as what you're talking about. Is somebody might out of the blue send a message. And I think that's an important leadership, I guess, insight, is that we're not always going to know exactly what we did, how we did, what we said, and the impact it will have. Sometimes we get fortunate and do see people down the line, or they take the time to send a card, write a message on LinkedIn, send a text, right? But I think for the most part, we choose the leadership path because we have no other choice. We are truly called to be in that role of bringing light into the darkness. And it's about that. It's not about the likes and the awards and the accolades. Yes, those are window dressing. And I don't think anybody's going to go, well, I don't want that. Well, of course. I mean, we're human, right? It feeds a certain piece of us. But on a big picture, on a grand scale, I think the work that you're doing and the long-term effects it's been having and will continue to have speaks to why, again, answering the call to leadership, if that is what you hear at any point in your life, is so, so important, because you will go to bed at night and know you did the best you could. You showed up with your values intact, your vision, and you're figuring out, who are you becoming? And I wanted to add one little thing to the archetype thing, to the who. It's also, and I'm sure you go into this in the book, it's also, who are you bringing with you on your journey? Who do you need? Do you need Merlin, right? The magician? Is that somebody in your life you need? Do you need a Sir Lancelot? Do you need, I love the Arthurian legends. Do you need to find your Camelot or build your Camelot where so I just thank you for doing the work that you do. And for those who would like to learn more about your services and more about you, where do you hang out online?
So if people want to see me on social media, that they can go to Instagram at Richard Newman Speaks, and I aim to put up inspiration on there for people about sort of 3 days a week. I'm also on LinkedIn, Richard Newman Body Talk on LinkedIn. And then, if people are interested in the book, they can go to liftyourimpact.com/the book, liftyourimpact.com/the book. And on there, there's lots more information about the book. But if they go right the way down to the bottom of that page, there's a form they can fill out, and they click on a box and they get the first 25 pages of the book for free, where they can then start working on their values piece in there to get their mindset in the right place. Because I was determined to make sure that people could get that piece for free, no matter who they are, anywhere in the world. They can go and get that piece and get started.
I love that. So team, please take advantage of this generous offer and all these links to connect with Richard, to follow him on social, and to get this 25-page workbook, essentially, that could help get you started on, if it's been a while. It's so nice to have a guide. All of these will be on his show notes page at pyppodcast.com. You can also just click the links that will be when you're listening, they'll be right there in his show notes there, and it'll take you to his book page. And it books still matter. You've written one. It's inspiring people. You have been influenced by, obviously, you read 200 books just on communication skills. But in the last, I don't know, do you have a couple of books, Richard, that have been influential on your journey to being the great leader that you are?
Yeah, it's interesting, actually. The books that I've read on leadership, there's been more sort of people in my life that have inspired me where I thought I'd like to be a leader like this one. I think books that have been really useful to me during challenging times. There's some books by David Goggins. If people take a look at his, I mean, he's sold millions of copies. And I found them especially useful when I was going through a time where I was feeling worn out. I was feeling weak. I was feeling like I don't want to be a leader right now. I'm just feeling in a dark hole. And, his style of communication, his way of writing is very different to mine. There's a lot of strong words in there, strong language.
Oh, yeah.
But I just found his work amazing. It was like it was sort of, knocking on the door of my soul and saying, wake up, find your strength, get out there and do this. And so I really enjoyed those books in a moment where I needed it, where I needed to step up to, just to mention briefly on the archetypes I tap into in the book. I was very much in my sort of servant archetype, and I needed to step into my sort of shield and silverbacks archetype so that I could be a big, more protector for the people around me. And, he really gave me that call to that warrior spirit through his books. So even though they're not really books on leadership, they're sort of more books on life, but about sort of leading yourself in your own life. So I enjoyed his books very much.
Yeah. David Goggins has been a very hot commodity here in the States, and I think worldwide. He has Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds, Never Finished, Unshackle Your Mind and Win the War Within. I've heard people speak of these, and his Can't Hurt Me, Master Your Mind and Defy the Odds has almost 88,000 reviews on Amazon. So it's obviously been extremely influential. And thank you for sharing those two. Curiously, I am a curious person. Do you want to give a shout out to a couple of people who have been guides for you? There's people who they've just sort of seen something in me that I never knew that I could do, and they've been there along the way. So there was, I think I mentioned briefly earlier, my hairdresser who sort of gave me, did I tell the hairdresser story earlier? You did.
My hairdresser did my first job. Yeah, so Tony Langford was my hairdresser back 23 years ago. And he was the person who said, I believe that you can be a coach of communication, when I didn't believe it myself. And, little did he realize that would lead me to training 120,000 people. And nor did I. But he had this spirit of believing in people and helping them believe in themselves. So that was amazing. There's also another business owner who I really admire called Isaac Batley, who he built a company at the same time, in the same time frame as me building mine. And I would occasionally just go and take him out for lunch and say, like, if I gave you the keys to my business, like, how would you run it? What am I missing? Because you're doing such a great job with yours. And he was able to look at it from a totally different perspective. And he made suggestions that I would never put into action because it's just sort of not how I was built. But by seeing it through his eyes, I was like, oh, wow, of course, I'm just seeing it from one very small perspective, seeing it from his mindset that's so different to mine, expanded my belief in what I could do and the ways in which I could achieve it in so many ways. So they were brilliant to me, and also multiple coaches that I've booked over the years. I believe very much in having a coach who can help you see what you're capable of and see you beyond the limitations that you have in your own mind.
Yes, I agree 100%. I do. And before we say goodbye, what parting words can you leave us with today, Richard, about becoming the best leader a person possibly can become?
Yeah, I think the key message I would leave everybody with is the greatest possible gift that you can give to people around you. And actually, Ted Lasso has been very popular recently, I think worldwide. And he did this so brilliantly. I think it's part of the reason people are so affectionate about him is that I've always said to people, you want to see people's greatness, see their greatness, see the possibility in them that they don't even see in themselves. Just like Ted Lasso did with Nate the Great, who was a locker room cleaner, and then became assistant coach and was doing brilliant things. If you can see someone's greatness, see something in them they don't believe they can do, and help them bring that part of themselves to life, then you can be an extraordinary leader, or have that as an extraordinary gift for the people around you in your life. And people have done that for me, and I certainly hope I get to do that for other people.
Well, this has been a fantastic conversation today, Richard. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your call to leadership, and for just being the great person that you are. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.